Hey, and welcome back to a new episode of Transformed and Renewed. If this is your first time checking us out, here's what I need you to do. I want you to hit that like and subscribe button on your screen. Yes, that like and subscribe button that you see. I want you to hit that. And that way you will be in the know, staying up with the latest content that we have, and you're not going to miss out. So once you do that right now, listen, you're already locked in and you're good to go. If you are returning and if you haven't done so, please hit that like and subscribe button because our content is able to go out to more people as well as the algorithms at least recognize that we're not bots, as well as we have some useful information to share. So if this information has helped you in any way, please hit that like and subscribe button on your screen. So we are going to get into it. We got some information, well, actually some news as relates to Robody, but we have some interesting studies that I wanted to share with you. Going to be high level, but again, you have access to this information. Why? Because it is publicly accessible. So we're going to be talking about two topics again, high level, and these are going to be related to Black Americans. Okay. So the first one has to deal with childhood trauma. How does it affect Black Americans? And then the second one is poor heart health. How does that also have an impact on Black Americans, specifically as it relates to dementia? Okay, so we're going to explore those, going to look at some research as it relates to that, or at least some of the articles that talk about this information. And this way you can have use this information for your own self, or you can share it with someone in case you're like, this article, I just came across it. It seemed pretty interesting to me. And so that's my goal, to share information with you so that way you can use it, you can apply it the best way you see fit. Let's get started. Let's jump into this first one. So, this article, which I'll share briefly, talks about childhood trauma. And I think that this is quite interesting because for a number of Black Americans or African Americans, childhood trauma is no new occurrence for a lot of people. And I think that that is important that we acknowledge that childhood trauma does occur in different individuals. And it's something that we should not put off any longer in terms of getting proper help. Okay. So let me scroll back up. So again, childhood trauma can harm health for life. And again, this is from UGA, University of Georgia. So as we look into this study, like I said, just going briefly through it. Again, you have access to this information, but I just thought it was neat how it looked at over 800 families beginning from 1996. So this is not necessarily a new study. It has been going on for almost over 30 years, close to 30 years, but not quite there yet. And looking at this, they have typically interviewed the participants every 2 to 3 years. Now, that is interesting data to re-interview the same participants every 2 to 3 years. And they also saw that the present study began at the age of 10. And one of the things that they noticed is that when children were in unsafe communities, they it pretty much created this negative response in them where it was related to inflammatory and physical responses that affected their central nervous system, or CNS. So, looking at this, one of the things that I thought was interesting was that as you look later into adulthood, some of these stressors can affect the mind and the body. And a lot of times, the individuals, as they get older, whether they're again young adulthood, early 20s, or even in your late 20s, you will also see how that can lead to the effects of drinking and using different substances in order to cope with a lot of that childhood trauma. And so, again, as we see here, alcohol misuse causes lasting physical consequences. So, because not only Black Americans, because I also know that there are other individuals, Caucasians, any type of culture that's dealing with whether it's childhood trauma, but specifically for Black Americans, alcohol misuse can cause some serious impact on the body. And that's because it also shows that because when you're so young at an age and you don't have a lot of resources, people to talk to, or even you don't know exactly what is going on when you are experiencing the trauma, or again, you are in this negative environment where saying something may not be safe, you don't know who to talk to, then that kind of leads you to coping using negative mechanisms, again, alcohol in this instance. And because of that use over time, that can affect the body just because alcohol has no essentially nutritional value, but consuming it so much because of how strong it is, it pretty much can do damage to a lot of your organs. And so we see here as we navigate through this study, one of the one of the points that was shown was, being exposed to racial discrimination can put you at an early risk for early alcohol use. And then, again, not sure, looking at the exact study, I have to follow up, but this was at least just some highlights or I guess some comments about the study. But overall, again, like I said, this is quite high level. Was that looking at this again, this can also cause some cardiac issues, as well as aging, because we know that consuming a lot of alcohol, even at an earlier age, or even at, let's say you start in your mid 20s and you start consuming alcohol, well, that can age your body just because, again, that alcohol is now affecting, potentially crippling those organs in your body because they need something that is more nutritious in order to sustain for life, as well as cells that are essential. And so when you don't have that at play, your body can start to exhibit more stress because it's not getting the essential nutrients it needs. And one of the comments that I thought was interesting was that, hey, there is more work to do in terms of, really supporting kids at a younger age, because if you can help kids, if you can really help them to, understand like, hey, there is help if you are dealing with trauma, then a lot of these negative uses, using alcohol, using substance or illegal substances, or any other means that would affect the mind and the body, and people from really getting the proper help and healing that they need. Being able to have those resources in place can do a lot for a child, not only in the short term, but in the long term, helping them to not repeat that cycle, especially if they have kids, taking out on them. So again, high level overview of this particular article, childhood trauma. Again, you can check this out at the uga.edu, and this is under health and wellness. So let's switch over. Let's switch over. uh, let's switch over to this other article. Yes. Yep. Yep. So this was another one. This talks about poor heart health. Yes, can increase the risk of dementia in Black Americans, or for Black Americans. So one of the things that we see here, the first word is diabetes, high blood pressure. Okay, this is not something that I've am new to, especially hearing as relates to Black Americans. Now, this is something again that I like to talk about, especially CVD, cardiovascular disease. How do we improve that? Because for some people, consuming a lot of your favorite foods, dealing with a lot of stress, and thinking that you can just overcome it by, using different things that you would, quote unquote, use as therapy, may not necessarily be therapy. It could be harmful for the body. Again, when you're eating a lot of hearty foods that contain a lot of saturated fats, as well as foods that contain a higher amount of carbohydrates but have a lower net fiber content, which is important, as well as added sugar content. Those are just some combinations that can negatively affect the body. And so, as we look at this study, It also found that Black Americans diagnosed with both conditions in midlife had significantly higher levels of a dementia related biomarker more than a decade later. Now, that is interesting because when we again look at different research and we see the effects of, diabetes and how a lot of these um, a lot of these health issues such as diabetes and high blood pressure, how they are caused, it is typically going to be more than often related to what we are consuming in the body rather than those external factors such as physical fitness, which that does play a role. But again, with the diabetes portion, has to is typically related to what we are consuming. And so one of the things about this one showed that cardiovascular health could be an indicator for degenerative brain diseases linked to dementia. And so, again, how well are you taking care of your heart, the cardiovascular system, this system that is operating? And sometimes we may not realize how much work it's doing. Again, when you think about eating a particular food, especially if it's rich, one time, especially if you're saying, hey, for an occasion, may not be anything wrong, but if it's constant, then that can start to cause a lot of plaque that can form in the body and the arteries, which can restrict a lot of essential blood flow, which is related to helping to produce more cells. So when you have a lack of blood flow in the body and a lot of cells are not being produced, this can cause a lot of issues in the body as well as in the brain, okay? Because the brain also needs blood in order to stay functioning correctly. And so, again, when we look at this information, this particular study looked at over 250 participants. Not sure what that exact number was, but it seems like it may not have been more than 500, could have been close to that number. I'm not sure. I have to look more into that. But let's look at another one. So obviously, this study kind of shows that cardiovascular health is an indicator of dementia, as we see right here highlighted. And then another one is that, again, let's see, taking steps to control high blood pressure and diabetes may protect Americans from brain degeneration and lower dementia later in life. Now, this is important because, again, having high blood pressure is not good. Diabetes is not good. Okay. Because this is essentially when we think about type 2 diabetes, where the body is not able to keep up with the insulin that is being produced. And so that can cause your body to have so much insulin that it can essentially shut down. Okay. So we have to understand that when we are consuming certain foods or we're not really taking care of our bodies, that the body is going to respond in a negative way. Now, we may think that, hey, the body just got to do what I tell it to do, but that doesn't necessarily happen. A heart attack does not wait for someone to get their life right. It will come. And so that means that we got to do better. Okay. Which leads to one of the interesting points, which talks about public health education in at risk communities. Because typically there is a trend, not to say that this is consistently, but a trend depending on the education level of individuals as well as the um, financial um, income or the economic status of these individuals. So, if individuals typically have a bachelor's or master's degree and they make over a certain figure, typically you would see improvement as it relates to overall health, as well as a lower risk when it comes to cardiovascular health or just health issues. Again, not saying that that is consistent across the board, but typically based on some research, it shows a trend where if you have less than a bachelor's degree or you make under a certain income, you typically are at a higher risk just because you're going to consume more foods that are convenient, not necessarily healthy. So again, not to say that this applies to everybody in situations, but this is typically, at least based on some previous research, it shows similar trend. Now, our goal here at Robot is that we want to be able to say, hey, that we want to reverse or even just lower those numbers to where in all groups, even those who may not have a higher level, such as a bachelor's degree, they probably only have a high school degree and they may not make over a certain amount, but still want to be able to help you to make some wise decisions as it relates to health at any socioeconomical status. So whether you're making six figures or you're making five figures, we want to be able to help you with making those wise decisions for your life because, again, we care about the whole person. Okay. So, again, this is some research as it relates to heart health, increasing, which can increase the risk of dementia. We want to essentially reverse that in Black Americans as well as childhood trauma. And I encourage you that if you're dealing with any of these, you can reach out to me because I want to be a resource for you to provide some resources that can really help you to get the help that you need, as well as to help you to, live a longer life, a richer life. Okay. So if you enjoyed this information, I need you to do one thing, well, actually, a couple of things. One, again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on your screen to follow us for more content. And one of the things, like I said, that we're doing, or before I leave, is that you can access these articles at the uga.edu, or you can type in news.uga.edu. Access this information, it is publicly accessible. One of the things that I did want to share is that we are going to be rolling out some good stuff over the next couple of weeks. I'll share more news about it, but just know that we are going to be doing some things, which one thing I can say, it likely will involve a membership. Okay. So that is as much as I can say. And we're just going to be doing it as another layer for us to be able to help you with your goals. But we also want to be able to tailor it depending on where you are in terms of your health journey. And we want to do it in that fashion because we know that some people need more of a handheld approach. Some people just need a, you know, a slight push, just get up and do it. And then some people just need a, just motivation. They can do it, but it's like, ugh, I just I just need, some additional like a lifestyle. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to do lifestyle. Okay. So I'm going to be rolling that out over the next couple of weeks. Could be sooner. Okay. But you will be in the know how. Well, you have to like and subscribe to our channel because otherwise you will not know this information. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on your screen at Robody 1212. You don't want to miss the content. Okay. We're about to do some wonderful things and I don't want you to miss out. So make sure you stay tuned because once we release the news, listen, it's up to the first however many people that we decide who say, hey, I claim this spot. It is up to them. So we want to make sure that you do not miss out. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on your screen. And until next time, I will talk with you